Great. So some amazing content there from Andrew and the other speakers. But you'll be pleased to know we have no more slides now. So just a conversation. And you know, AI challenges. Clearly, we've had a lot there on the security side, and so I've just rapidly crossed off that. I think Andrew has done that fantastically well. So thank you, Andrew. So look, when we talk about open source AI, I think what's interesting to think about is not just the models themselves, and we've heard quite a bit from Hugging Face about the different sort of models that they make available, the open source models, but also the other infrastructure and the other layers that sit around the AI models themselves. So the kind of prompt engineering, the kind of frameworks, the data engineering pieces, the infrastructure that we need to run and train these models and so on. Some of these things obviously happen within our own organizations versus public cloud in other cases and hybrids and others. So what this conversation is going to be about really is looking at a whole host of the sort of supporting layers, I suppose, beyond just the models. We'll probably touch on models as well, but wanted to give you a sort of rounded flavour of what the open source sort of ecosystem and supporting pieces really looks like. So I'm really pleased to be joined by a broad panel of different speakers from different parts of this world, from the vendor side, from the end user side, and from myself from consulting side. So I guess I should start by introducing myself, and then we'll introduce the panelists. So I'm Oliver Crunk, the Technology Director at Scott Logic, working with Colin and many of our other team on AI R&D, but also on things like sustainable technology and ethical technology and other topics. So that's me. Erica, if we can go next.
Okay, so Erica Langhi, I'm a solution architect at Red Hat. I started my career on machine learning in healthcare. Then I got distracted by other things, including data, cloud computing, and now, after 25 years, I'm still back in being involved in AI. So that's me.
Chris.
Hi everyone, Chris Booth, product owner for NatWest, primarily in machine learning and conversational agents. Started not in university or mathematics or computer science, most people, but in the Royal Air Force, where I was more front-end design and designing systems for the pilots, the Eurofighter Typhoon. Got exposure to machine learning there, doing voice control, and been doing NLP and chatbots ever since.
Hi everyone, I'm Carly Richmond. I'm a Senior Developer Advocate at Elastic and co-chair of the Zenith Emerging Tech Group at Finos. Before that I used to work in Morgan Stanley for about 10 years, so a lot of experience of building financial software. And my exposure to AI has really been over the last couple of years through being an advocate and learning about different technologies such as models, vector search and other capabilities. And I'm excited to hear your questions.
I'm Alex Dollery at LSEG. You already know all about me. So.
Brilliant. Thanks, Alex. So I wanted to start by talking about ethics. And for those of you who were at our last event hosted at NatWest, we had a great talk, a great speaker from the AI ethics perspective. So do go and check that out. That goes into ethics in more detail. But I wanted to start here because so the responsible usage of models is an interesting one, right? There's lots of debate at the moment about should models be able to generate certain types of content, but also that kind of using private data with open source models. And I wondered, you know, where does, so I guess to start with you, Alex, where's your sort of feeling on the use of sort of private data with open source models? Are there challenges there that kind of you're looking to address, or is this something that's not an issue?
Certainly since GDPR came into place, there's certainly areas with that. So when you mix that with AI, it gets very complicated. So it is very complicated to solve those sort of problems. Also, you have to fit within the contextual space for LLMs, right? The contextual window. So there are a lot of problems to solve in that area. And then you have all the regulation that comes into place on top of that. You have to fit it within. I think that's my main comment.
And Chris, what's your sort of take on this one?
Much like we touched on briefly on security, I think as long as you follow the usual procedures, then using internal data is okay. I'm focused primarily on just the models themselves that have been pre-trained, and so fine-tuning, as long as you've got through security perimeter promptly, is not really a problem. I'd say we're having an easier time at the moment. But I think that why we've not got anything to production, especially for external facing applications, is models aren't accurate enough, in short.
And what about harmful content when it comes to these models? Carly, what's your sort of take on this one?
I guess the harmful content can come from all sorts of places, like we were talking about. In fact, it was mentioned in the prior session you talked about, where's the responsibility in making sure that, harmful content is it a problem of, you know, that person that's the front end engineer who's taking in the prompts to try and make sure that they're making sure that, you know, it's not going to be injected with particular prompts that are going to be adversarial, particularly if you think about retraining and private data going back in, depending on the model license terms, that can be something that's a concern. We talked about poisoning, so are they poisoning the model itself to start with? In fact, so Nightshade would be an example of a tool that's been brought in for very innocent reasons with protection of copyright. The idea of being able to protect your artwork, but actually it effectively poisons the models that is used that to then infer and can generate false results that can impact things like bias, etc. I think it's a bit murky because the responsibility on, you know, who actually is responsible for making sure that the results that are coming out on the other side are not potentially biased or harmful is a bit of a murky area. It's still not quite clear where the responsibility is in terms of us as engineers, us as, you know, system owners, and also the model owners themselves. And the thing that we need to maybe figure out is where's the collective responsibility. So we need to put safeguards into the applications we build. Obviously, we had a great talk on some of that in terms of what Andy was talking about.
Yep.
But again, we're still figuring it out.
And Erica, do you think there are lessons that we can, I mean, given Red Hat, you know, clearly was instrumental with Linux and sort of one of the earliest open source projects we can all point at as a massive success. Are there things you think we can learn from sort of the Linux sort of projects when it comes to sort of this new wave of open source, you know, models?
Yeah, sure. So in a sense, you know, we heard about the power of the community that is fostering innovation, and that's the first message that we're taking also from the Linux project and the community. In terms of the other messages around transparency, which is really related also of all the talks that is going on at the moment in terms of responsible AI. So transparency means also a focus on model explainability, which is really important because the moment you want to adopt AI, you need to make sure that you understand where a decision is coming from. Otherwise, you're interacting with a black box, and sometimes organizations, especially in the financial sector, are risk adverse. So having the ability to get that trust in adopting AI is really important for many things, also in terms of addressing bias and discrimination, as it was mentioned in other talks. So transparency and openness are definitely two good messages coming from the Linux story. The other point is the power of collaboration and the ecosystem. I think Alex mentioned that in his talk. And we're seeing that because there are many projects happening in the AI space, but the power really comes when all these projects are coming together and each project can contribute in different ways. We have an example, a use case, for instance, where Red Hat is collaborating with Swift, Cove, and C3 AI to put together a modern platform for anomaly detection to address fraud and money laundering. And this is really a real-time ML actually fraud detection system that is powerful just because it comes from the collaboration. So again, the ecosystem and the collaboration are really key to provide this message. And these are all things that we learned from the involvement with Linux and the community of open source and Red Hat, basically.
And I guess kind of staying on that sort of community and sort of impacts to a community, there's been a bit of pushback, I think, from some out there looking at the growth of technology. You know, technology is now projected to grow to be a significant energy consumer by 2040. At the moment, it's sort of around the 4% figure. They're saying sort of nearer 15% by 2040, which is pretty scary numbers. I mean, Chris, I know you and I have spoken a little bit about this in the past, about the need to sort of be somewhat responsible about the use of these technologies and the energy that they consume and the resources that they consume. Is that something that's increasingly becoming like an agenda item for the work that you're doing?
So NatWest are pushing some great initiatives on just being more climate conscious, creating more climate metrics. I know you and I are kind of working together at the moment on how do we integrate and help our developers or data scientists be more mindful when using or developing models, on top of the endless list of security, explainability, ethics, and everything else. So there needs to be some sort of lightweight, easy to consider framework to use that just gives it like a sanity check. I think anything more than that is realistically not going to get used right now. I think it's on people's minds, but it's kind of like one of the speakers said earlier: money drives, revenue drives. So it's ultimately the focus on getting performant models and both trying to get increased performance along with shrinking the size and latency and all the other issues that come along with models at the moment.
And I guess there's sort of trying to reduce the impact of the model, but then I guess there's also the really exciting and incredible things these new models can do. I mean, Alex, the sort of innovation in the community, like, it's some amazing sort of things, like, for example, weather forecasting, the Google GraphCast model and other models we're seeing, like, for materials and so on. So do you think that this will be a net gain because the innovation this can unlock kind of outweighs any of its impact? What's your sort of take on this one?
Well, it depends where the innovation goes, right? If we see a massive increase in the GPU usage, then how can we curb that, right? So that's a massive problem. That's where it looks like things are going in AI, is just throw more GPUs at it. So I think that's where the problem could be.
Was it just boasted buying 600 equivalent, something like that, yeah? 600 H100s. Yeah, so we're not even 0.0001% of that, so it's small fry.
Erica, Carly, from a technology vendor perspective, where is this sort of the responsibility of using some of these advanced systems? Kind of, is that something you're increasingly hearing from customers as a concern?
I'm going to go first.
Yeah.
It's definitely a concern because, of course, there is this attempt to definitely embrace more AI because it can provide benefits to the business, but at the same time, there is a cost in training the models. So you want to understand also and give to your customer information about how much does it cost and what is the impact as well on the environment to get information on a specific model. I think, yes, those are definitely concerns that we're hearing from customers.
Yeah, data leakage is a big concern that we hear about, the idea of, well, I want to keep my data private, I want to use whichever pre-canned models to train on it. Am I going to be worried about, my intellectual property making it out to be used for tuning? And that's obviously a big concern. But even if you're building and generating your own models, which we have our own one, Ilser, certainly there's a concern about, when you're producing particular results, is the sanitation the responsibility of you as a model producer? Yeah. Or is it on actually yourselves or the system to sanitize particular outputs that might not necessarily be what you want for that particular use case? So there's definitely those kinds of challenges, along with the compute concerns and the escalating costs are things that we tend to hear about a lot.
Yeah. I mean, we're seeing sort of signs of kind of the cost of these things becoming a driver to kind of go for smaller models, optimize, tune, and so on. So there's hope there that the commercial lever, this stuff just can't keep getting more and more expensive, right? The cost to serve is going to have to come into play. But Carly, I wanted to stay with you because I want to move the conversation onto the prompt engineering and data engineering sort of side of things. And I know you were talking to me before we did this about the sort of vector search stuff that you're doing at Elastic, and I think for me, the two exciting things that I suppose have come out or have risen in prominence over the last year or so is vector and graph. And so I know you were sort of looking at vector search. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So on the Elastic specific thing, obviously there's different vendors with different vector database solutions, but vector search, for anyone who's not familiar, is basically rather than traditional search where it's direct matches of keyword terms. We're talking about going back to our high school geometry and thinking about, scary moment, people. Going back to the idea of vector similarity. So the way it is, you take your text, you will basically use a model, a text embedding task model, to actually generate a numerical vector representing that particular data, and then you apply the same model to your query in order to get the closest documents in matching. Quite often with use in AI systems, this is where RAG architectures, not red, amber, green for ourselves in financial services, but more the retrieval augmented generation. So basically using the output of a vector search set of results alongside the same prompt, basically to ground the model results and be based off that particular set of documents. So quite often using tools such as Langhi, which was mentioned in one of the talks, and other tools combined with a vector database to ground and give you an initial set of results before you generate the response.
And so kind of moving on to the graph piece, Chris, I know you and I have talked quite a bit about this, and at the previous one of these back in August, we also talked a fair bit about using graph to kind of control the LLM and stop it kind of wandering off into sort of uncharted territory, using that kind of graph and the relationships in it to sort of constrain things. So we've seen now sort of LangChain go down a LangGraph direction, but I mean, I know you're also working on some exciting new sort of agent sort of thinking. So where's your head when it comes to vector and graph, particularly the sort of graph technology?
Okay, so let's go through some fundamentals. Graphs or knowledge graphs, not your X and Y charts, but there's a common database called graphs, popular providers like Neo4j. Compared to tabular relational databases where you've got rows and columns, graphs use something called relationships or edges. So you have a node like Chris, that node can have properties, age 34, although I look younger. Chris is friends with Ollie, I hope, and that edge there is the relationship. What's super powerful about knowledge graphs is those relationships give like an extra dimension to the data that allows you to provide insight, but also, interestingly, allows faster inference time. So the problem with tabular data is, unless you do a lot of joins in SQL, you have to trawl the whole thing, while graphs, you can inference over the edges, over these relationships, and find answers a lot quicker. One problem with RAG, for example, is you chunk a document into 500 words, let's say, and that's how you get the language model to withdraw that text. Graphs, you could get the language model to query in Cypher, which is a popular Neo4j graph language, and it provides much more accurate and faster results. But most excitingly, this is what LangChain just released with LangGraph, is one huge problem with language models is they are autoregressive. They try and predict the next word, basically. That's not how humans communicate with each other. So if I go to Ollie and go recommend me a movie, ChatGPT will just go, it would just output a bunch of garbage and go, here's 10 categories of movies and here's one of each. While Ollie, if he doesn't know me, will ask me questions something like, oh, what genres are you interested in? If he doesn't know me well, he'll be able to infer, well, Chris loves Marvel because he's a nerd, and I know there's been the latest Ant-Man film out, so he would go, right, Chris, have you watched the latest Ant-Man? To which I would say, good recommendation, but Marvel have released crap recently, so no, I won't watch that. So Infer GPT, which I just released open source, is this amalgamation of agents and knowledge graphs to kind of ask questions back better, but be able to inference on the information you have, but most importantly, the information you don't have. Because that's what we do in our brain. We first do like inference in the head to go, okay, what do I know about this person? Okay, I need these 3 nodes first before I can really serve the answer. That's the main difference. So I think there's some sort of hybrid approach where you have a language model as a front end and you query knowledge graphs at the back, both for RAG, both for information retrieval, but then also inferencing. It started out as just a self-study project, but there's been so much excitement and interest around it, I've decided to try and open it up to contributors.
Thanks, Chris. Alex, what are you seeing in sort of the prompt engineering space that's got you excited recently? Is there anything that stands out?
I think AutoGPT.
Okay.
And Baby AGI, that sort of getting LLMs to write prompts. I think that was the thing that really blew my mind.
Somewhat meta, isn't it, I suppose, getting these things to sort of program themselves.
Iterative prompting, tree of thought, that sort of stuff really. I was like, wow, when you can get this working very well, that's going to be a game changer and that's going to change everything. So that's the next step, right, is working on improving that,
One of the big open source models that seems to have kind of risen in popularity recently is Mixtral by Mistral. It's terrible. They've both got very similar names, right? It's difficult to say. I'll throw this open to anyone. But why do we think this has kind of captured the imagination? Is it because it's in theory similar to GPT-4? Because the theory with GPT-4, right, is it's a series of smaller models than a kind of a mixture of experts type approach. Do we think this is why the Mixtral model is being particularly kind of popular? Because it's I suppose that, Alex?
Yeah, because it's what we hear GPT-4 is, right? It's also got a built-in orchestration layer, which I think is something we've all been trying to perfect over time, So I think that's the exciting part of it.
Yeah. Right. So let's move on to the exciting topic of governance, shall we? Eric, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what are you seeing with customers when it comes to sort of what are they prepared to sort of put in the public cloud versus hybrid versus on-prem, and how are you seeing customers going to manage that when it comes to sort of AI deployment?
Yeah, and that's an interesting concern, actually. And Carly was talking about the fact that, sometimes difficult to put, of course, for a security reason, proprietary data or organizations' data on public cloud. So definitely, as a data scientist, you want to have the flexibility. So you want to have the ability to use the public cloud and the flexibility, elasticity that it provides to train the models, but at the same time, then you want to fine-tune the model with your own data, because this is where actually the advantage of and the competitiveness of your own data comes in. So ideally, a hybrid approach is actually what gives probably the best way to tackle this problem, because ideally you would want to have the same platform that will allow you to help data scientists and developers as well, working together and collaborate and use the advantages of the public cloud and also on-prem. And that not only for governance in terms of security, but back to the conversation we had about ESG concerns.
Right.
You want to contain the cost and make sure that the hybrid approach can guarantee you the kind of a best of both worlds, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So hopefully there's a roving mic. I'm looking at Colin for questions.
Oh, I don't have one.
We don't have one. So I wanted to, I always, with these things, I like to sort of throw open to audience for questions. I can repeat the question so that folks can hear it. Do folks have sort of questions for the panel? Or has it just been so much sort of mind food, you're now like kind of, whoa.
I'll start with one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so when do people in the panel think this technology will really make a difference in consumer products? You know, as I mentioned to you before, consumer products, Alexa is dumb. When will we see consumer products that reflect this level of capability?
I'm going to throw it on to Alex. What's your take on that one?
So a lot of the processors on the MacBook, the new MacBook Pros, can run LLMs, the large LLMs. So I think they're getting ready for it.
Right.
Timeline, I don't know, but I think that if you see that being released, then it's coming soon.
Well, the Google Pixel devices have also got that capability as well, right? So
I would say Q1 this year with the Rabbit R1. It's technically a consumer product with a new special neurosymbolic large action model, they call it. But essentially it connects to any of your apps on your phone. You press a little button on this like little square device and the agent goes away and carries out tasks for you. That's production-ready agents right there.
Erica, Carly, thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I'm thinking as well about the large action models. This is really like very related to the consumer product, and it's coming very soon. Yep. So it's going to be an interesting year actually.
Yeah, well, my husband just got the latest Pixel phone with all of the AI capabilities, so I think it's not far.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's the better question, what about for financial services?
Ooh, okay. Well, you volunteered that one, Chris. Go for it.
I think internal use cases, like Q3 end this year, if not already. Like simple Q&A retrieval's already done. More, I think agents is a bigger question mark. For myself, especially retail, and I lead machine learning for Cora, which is a bank chatbot, internal and external. I think external use cases a long way away. Just because.
But for internal use, for employee augmentation?
Already happening.
Right. You've stitched off Alex now. Alex, are you prepared to talk about this one?
No, I think that's agents and knowledge graphs. Back and forth between knowledge graphs and LLMs. Those are the key areas, trends of 2024, I think.
Yeah, no, it certainly was rising in popularity last year. From the work we've been doing, the R&D we've been doing, it seems to show great promise. We've heard a lot from Andrew just now about the kind of hallucinations and other problems, and it does feel like having some other technologies to act as that sort of counterweight, that control barrier is certainly interesting. I'm glad you mentioned large action models as well, because I think what's been interesting for me over the last few months is we're almost getting to a point now where every month or every few weeks we're seeing a new exciting sort of model, and many of these are often open source, right? So we've seen the forecasting model we touched on earlier, we've seen large action models, more video type things. So it's going to be really interesting to see what is the next exciting sort of open source model that comes out. And I guess there's a danger, isn't there, that we perhaps get a little bit magpie syndrome. We kind of the new shiny thing comes along and everyone all of a sudden sort of jumps on that. So I guess what are your thoughts on sort of kind of ensuring we leverage because we already have an awful lot of capability already. So Alex, what are you kind of supposed thinking about in terms of balancing out, maximising what you've already got versus not getting too distracted by what's new and coming?
I mean, I love the open source model world, so invest in that. I think the community will bring some great results to this year in open source LLMs. I think that's the way to go forward. But then again, the things that OpenAI apparently are working on, that's going to be the
Q-Star,
next area.
GPT-5, whatever that is. Yeah.
So balancing both of those, but then when we get access to the OpenAI stuff, how we're going to get access is another question. So I would like to see open source LLMs really do very well this year. That's what I'd like to see. I think they will.
So you think Llama 3 could be the thing that kind of, or do you think there'll be something else?
Oh, there'll be loads of things.
Right.
But there's some big players in the market, so I think there'll be a lot of things.
Yeah, a big priority for us at the moment is just try to, while keeping safe and and achieving our security measures, try and increase our ability to adopt new technologies as quickly as possible. I think trying to go for it's a hard balance between short-term wins and demonstrating delivery, but whatever we input is going to be outdated in a month, literally. So I love modularization. I think trying to get an architecture that's flexible, fast, you might be only a month ahead of the competitor, but as these AI capabilities get more and more advanced, that month's a lot of time to gain, especially in trades, for example.
There was another question at the
I don't believe that AI can be evil, but people can. Cyber criminals are already using it to improve the quality of spam and scam messages. It can be used, and it is used to create malware. It is used to generate voice, which will sound like voice of somebody's son or daughter. So what are your thoughts on how can we stop this new wave of cyber criminals with much better tools? Is there something on the intersection of open source, AI, and cybersecurity which can be applied?
I guess part of it is responsible usage. So it came back to, I think, that point that was mentioned before around, is it the responsibility of a model, kind of producer or creator, versus someone that's using it as an engineer in their applications? It's actually in reality a collective responsibility. So a lot of models, for example, we talk about Llama 2, Meta have their responsible guide. And the question is, with open source, do we have our own responsible guides, not just for what the model should be able to do, but also what you should do within using it in your software? I think responsible guides versus legislation is something that we're still grappling with, and is something that's going to take time to resolve. So I think it's more of a collective responsibility for all of us. And I think the other thing is making sure that when we're using these things under the covers, that it's transparent. So this idea of watermarking your applications to say we are making use of AI under the covers, so people are aware. That's probably the two things that spring to mind for me from your question. It's, yes, there's malicious actors. Maybe as engineers, we're always optimistic that people do the right thing with what we build and don't think about that opposing side. But it means we just need to use these things responsibly. And then obviously make sure for models that maybe they're less prone to these kinds of interferences. So if you're an engineer or you're a model person, the question is, should you be taking that prompt in? Should you be generating that result or not? Does anyone have anything to add?
I think the other good point is that I can see more and more framework coming from the government as well in terms of responsible AI. So it's not that everything is left, without control, but there are more guides and frameworks on responsible AI, and that could also help in terms of working with those technologies.
I also think there's a degree of we've become very fixated on generative AI, as in generating things. I think where the innovation needs to come is almost governance or filtering AI. I mean, you heard Andrew outline a whole load of different challenges we're going to need to solve, and I do fear that we're kind of allowing let's just generate a whole bunch of stuff to sort of run away. I feel the area of innovation that's needed, and perhaps this is where the open source community can kind of really play a part, is in thinking about where are those sort of control points or filtering sort of layers that we need to kind of cook up, because there probably needs to be as much innovation in sort of smart governance and risk management as there has been in sort of the innovation for functionality's sake. Alex, did you have anything on this one?
I don't know what to say really, because I think that when Mark Zuckerberg open sources AGI and then it gets jailbroken, you could have a whole different Pandora's box open. But, no, it's interesting, I think. I agree with you. I don't think that the evil is going to come from the technology. I think it will come from humanity that uses that incorrectly. As long as we keep up to date with it. I mean, it's the same thing as cybersecurity, right? There's there's a vulnerability and then it gets patched. The vulnerability gets patched. There's sort of two-way between the two. So I think that's the way it's going to be. But at some point, if things do speed up very dramatically, then we could have a different problem to solve.
There was probably got time for one or two more questions. So. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually counter your point, which is say if it's everyone's responsibility. In my experience in other domains, when it's everyone's responsibility, it becomes nobody's responsibility.
We already have that problem though, don't we? If you think
So-
about emergence of all the things we've built over the years. So yeah, it's a fair point.
But on a different point, great content, and I'm deeply technical, and hopefully technical audience here, people should get it, or at least some of it. How do you deal with, because this is existential for some companies, like you said, follow the money, right? The money's going to drive the activity. How do you explain this to decision makers who are not technical in your organisations, and stop their eyes glazing over with this stuff? Because if I went and talked to my CEO about this stuff,
Yeah,
right,
it's tricky.
it's tricky, right?
It's a great question.
How do you deal with explaining this?
Can't hear the question. So,
Short précis.
so the question is how this is all very complex, very technically challenging. How do you explain this to sort of the C-level, to the kind of the business maker, decision makers? Who wants to? Okay. Alex, you wanna go
Explain to
last one?
parents first. No, like it's an iterative process. So just keep pitching it to people or explaining to people, and then you'll find the areas which don't make sense. So before you pitch it to the CEO or show the CEO, explain it to someone who's similar, and then find the areas which you haven't explained it clearly enough.
Storytelling, demos, oversimplified summary, but I found that effective.
Well, you have first-hand experience of this one, don't you? Because, well, I suppose you have the excitement of one of your very senior stakeholders kind of asking you to kind of present this to them. But
Yeah, I created the Cora Financial Coach Initiative, which I'm leading it, well, not at the moment because I'm on paternity leave, but it's still running. So rather than focus on all the data engineering, MLOps, AI issues, I just wanted to tell a story about how we can serve our customers to improve their financial well-being, retail mostly. Wasn't like.
yeah, but I guess articulating that it's not just a magic wand, and there are a whole bunch of
Yeah,
sort
in
of
order to
complexity.
achieve all this
Yeah.
cool AI stuff, we need to invest in our data infrastructure. It was the kind of catch-22 at the end of it. But I spent one slide on that, one slide on business and ROI, and most of it was actually telling the story.
Erica, from a Red Hat perspective, kind of
Yeah, I guess again, as Chris was saying, the storytelling, the demo, the kind of exercise of like explaining the problem, I think can help. I don't think there's a magic recipe. I think it's just an attempt to try different things and deliver the message.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you very much, everyone, and thanks for the questions. So yeah, that's us at time, I believe. Isn't it, Colin? Brilliant. Thank you.